finest acts. You could go to the theatre. But to see it all, watch the Royal Variety Performance. Saturday, 8:05 on BBC One.
Time Watch follows one man's attempt to rewrite history on BBC Two shortly. Just how old is the Sphinx? Here on BBC One, Ruby Wax ponders the true meaning of the family in 15 minutes after the main evening news now, with Nicholas Witchell.
Bosnian Serb forces appear to be close to taking Bihać, the town the UN was supposed to protect. Serb forces are in the outskirts. The situation is described as dire. The Americans say the Serbs cannot be stopped. The former Chancellor, Norman Lamont, has denied that he's preparing to mount a leadership challenge to John Major. And Wraith Rovers have produced one of the greatest upsets in Scottish football by beating Celtic in the League Cup final. Good evening. Bosnian Serb forces are tonight on the outskirts of Bihać, the Muslim town which was supposed to be part of a UN safe area. According to a UN spokesman in the town, the situation in Bihać is dire and terrible, with Bosnian forces down to their last lines of defense. In Sarajevo, the UN commander, General Sir Michael Rose, has said that if the military situation gets much worse, the UN will find it difficult to continue its peacekeeping role. One other development, 62 British troops are among 160 UN soldiers who've been detained by Serb forces near Gorazda.
The Serbs are doing what they said they would do, which is to continue their attack. Their aim is to demilitarize the enclave their way by capturing or destroying the Bosnian Army's 5th Corps defending it. According to latest reports, the Serbs are within 200 yards of the town's hospital and civilians are fleeing on the one road out to the north. Even by the UN's own account, the once safe area is at the mercy of the Serbs.
Well, it depends on the unfolding military scene. But if the scene gets much worse at the military level, then I suspect that the peacekeeping mission will find it very difficult to continue.
The UN, instead of stopping the fighting, is waiting for it to stop. With 25,000 men in Bosnia, it cannot save the safe area. The airstrikes option may actually have gone. NATO can't put up aircraft without first taking out the Serbian missile systems. It can't do that without the risk of going to war, and the UN force is not a war-fighting machine.
We are a peacekeeping mission, but we can only work when there's a general willingness on both sides to proceed down a path of peaceful resolution, not through war-fighting means.
That hasn't happened yet. The British are especially involved, as 62 of their soldiers were detained by the Serbs today on their way to or from the isolated garrison at Gorazde. Their detention was a guarantee of the United Nations non-involvement in Bihać. The UN doesn't like to use the word, but they're hostages.
I would say that they've got absolutely no freedom of movement, that they're blocked where they actually are at the moment. We've been through this situation before. It tends to be the response of the Bosnian Serbs that when they fear airstrikes, they take hostages, in their view. And whereas they're not in any way being menaced on the ground or threatened, nevertheless, they have no freedom of movement, and I regard that position extremely seriously.
But the main crisis is in Bihać, and on the radio tonight, the mayor said that the Serbs were pouring fire on the town centre from high ground captured yesterday. He was contemptuous of the United Nations. Can they defend themselves, he said, let alone defend us? Martin Bell, BBC News, Sarajevo.
The US Defense Secretary William Perry has admitted that it is too late to prevent the Bosnian Serbs from taking Bihać and that further airstrikes would be pointless. The Russian Foreign Minister Andrei Kozyrev also stressed that a diplomatic, not a military solution, is now the only option.
Even as NATO warplanes refueled for another patrol over Bosnia this morning, Western leaders were admitting that it's now too late for air power to save Bihać. Not only are UN commanders unwilling to call for airstrikes, but even the United States, the main advocate of bombing, concedes that it can't halt the Serb attack.
Even if they were to ask for the airstrikes cannot determine the outcome of the ground combat. They can punish the Serbs, but they cannot determine the outcome of the ground combat.
So it was little surprise, perhaps, that last night's emergency meeting of the UN Security Council yielded condemnation of the Serbs, but little more. The reality is that the countries with troops on the ground in Bosnia, including Britain, France and Russia, have never wanted to force an end to the fighting. Indeed, Russia's Foreign Minister Andrei Kozyrev in Belgrade today said it wasn't the UN's job to wage war, and he called for another attempt at negotiation by the key outside powers involved, the so-called contact group.
We have to avoid once and for all, stop the Bihać tragedy, but also avoid new Bihaćes. And the only road to that, to my mind, is indicated by Geneva package of contact group.
It's doubtful, though, that a strategy of negotiation can save the other safe areas from going the way of Bihać. The UN has never had the mandate to defend them, only to deter attacks on them by threatening airstrikes. But the air power card has now been played and found lacking. It's been too restrained to hurt the Serbs, but if it was any more aggressive, the UN's position would become untenable. David Schuckman, BBC News.
Here, the former Chancellor Norman Lamont has denied suggestions that he's planning to challenge John Major for the Conservative Party leadership. Earlier, the Home Secretary, Michael Howard, said Mr. Lamont would look ridiculous if he did. If there is to be a contest, the challengers need to get the backing of 34 Tory MPs by Wednesday.
The Prime Minister returned to Westminster tonight ahead of a tough week. Attempts are being made to drum up the 34 signatures needed for a leadership challenge amid growing discontent at the government's strong-arm tactics to tackle tomorrow's threatened rebellion on contributions to the European budget. Speculation's been mounting that Norman Lamont will declare himself as a stalking horse if a contest is launched. Ministers were quick to pour scorn on his prospects. The Home Secretary pointed out that 2 years ago, Mr. Lamont had praised the Prime Minister for the way he'd negotiated the contributions at Edinburgh.
Now, the press cuttings and Hansard are littered with quotations of that kind from Norman Lamont. I'm sure it's obvious to him that he would cut an absolutely ridiculous figure if he were to do anything of the kind which is being speculated about at the moment.
But the former Chancellor himself played down the idea that he would be involved in a contest.
Well, in the last couple of weeks, I've several times publicly said that I had no intention of participating in a leadership election. That remains the position. I can't see circumstances, I can't see why that would change. I do not wish to be involved in this.
It's understood the chief canvassers for a contest come from the Eurosceptic right wing of the party, although one senior backbencher admitted tonight there's also growing discontent on the centre-left. But there are doubts whether enough MPs will be found to request a contest, and some right-wingers prefer stalling things for a year until a viable alternative to Mr. Major is ready to stand. Backbenchers have been touring the TV studios to put their views. One who said he wouldn't back a leadership contest, nevertheless was seriously worried about the leadership's tactics.
I'm elected for Aldridge Brownhills. Surely on the floor of the House of Commons I must express views that I hold deeply or that I hold on behalf of my constituents. So we've introduced a whole series and raft of other issues into the management of this vote that were wholly unnecessary.
With tomorrow's threatened rebellion showing all signs of crumbling, the Prime Minister can be confident he'll win. The danger is, though, that if MPs fail to rebel and therefore hold on to the party whip, they're then entitled to join calls for a leadership challenge or indeed take part in another brewing rebellion on VAT. Carolyn Quinn, BBC News, Westminster.
A rabbi has been killed and an Israeli policeman wounded near a Jewish settlement in the occupied West Bank. The attack happened near the city of Hebron when gunmen opened fire on the rabbi's car, which went out of control and overturned. Israelis are blaming the shooting on the militant Islamic group Hamas. Aid workers in Zaire say they're increasingly concerned about a British driver who's been missing since Friday. The man works for the Glasgow-based charity Assist. He disappeared close to the border with Rwanda after the convoy he was with became caught in crossfire between Rwandan refugees and Zairian soldiers. The Bishop of Derry, Dr. Seamus Hegarty, has confirmed that allegations of sex abuse have been made against another Catholic priest in Northern Ireland. The case involves a young girl living in Londonderry. Her family say that they first complained about the abuse 3 years ago, but the church failed to act. In a separate development, police have confirmed that they're investigating reports of a paedophile ring in Londonderry.
Dr. Hegarty, installed as Bishop of Derry earlier this month, said that priests informed the police of the allegations of child abuse by one of their colleagues, a member of a religious order who's now at a monastery in the Irish Republic. Dr. Hegarty said he's more than happy to meet the family of the child, who was 8 at the time the abuse allegedly took place, but which only came to light when the child was receiving counselling in 1991. Dr. Hegarty said such cases will not be covered up.
I shall certainly, on behalf of the Diocese of Derry, address it in a very responsible way and take the necessary steps to ensure that the best possible remedy in the circumstances can be applied. I am certainly not in the business, as my colleagues are not in trying to conceal or to hide